Hey everyone, my name is Noah Bates, and this is my preliminary design proposal for Toby Brantley Park. So my approach to design is very grounded in story and memory and identity of not only Eupora, but of the Brantley family and the broader Black community in Eupora. So for me, it's very essential to tell a story and activate a space while also allowing it to be not static, but this dynamic space for people to gather and experience the story while also interacting with one another. So to quickly recap the history, we begin with the foundation of early growth around the Georgia Pacific Rail Line, which later transformed into Eupora after Eupora UD. And then we have Toby and Sedalia Brantley and kind of their impact and role surrounding the Poor People's Campaign, the MLK movement, and things of that nature with the mule train. We then have kind of the integration of the schools, transforming that into kind of a more dynamic space for people. Then looking at kind of the establishment and foundation of the park, really highlighting those basketball courts and the intergenerational activity that occurs surrounding them. And then we transition into kind of the implementation of the food tax and what that did to kind of really activate that space. So moving forward to site analysis, we have an 8.3 acre site located in Eupora, but more importantly, the city and community of Churchill. So that's located in the broader Webster County in Mississippi. So diving in, I kind of studied a figure ground, which is really looking at an analysis of the density and kind of development surrounding the park to really inform my design, as well as a system of primary arteries. So looking at how you navigate through the city and how people are accessing this site. So then moving forward to site analysis, I have four main characteristics that really stood out to me on the site. So looking at the clear cutting of the site, I left one tree removing habitat and kind of solar exposure and wind exposure as well. Then moving forward to the clear cutting of the site, which left the berm that prevents drainage and really disconnects the hydrological functions of the site. Then we have the topographical change, looking at a 40-foot total change from the highest peak of the site down to the lowest, acknowledging that this is a steeper grade towards the south end of the site. Then moving forward is the disconnection from the school. That barrier is a really hard edge that kind of creates a sense of isolation, not just on the site, but adjacent to it. So then moving forward to SWOT analysis. So my analysis kind of revealed a site full of opportunity. There's a lot of strengths to be had and a lot of weaknesses, but those weaknesses can be viewed as strengths and opportunities. So it's a blank slate, a new opportunity, a fresh start. So after presenting kind of the initial pass at concept, my feedback was that, this narrative entry provides a really strong approach to tell a story for the park, but can that be located at both entrances instead of one? How do you experience that story no matter where you are in the park? Then another idea or suggestion was the parking. Parking was located southern, but how do you relocate that to be more of a centrally located feature that kind of really promotes accessibility across the site? Another was an ecological zone. That's not necessarily a desire of the community, but how can that be implemented into other design features? So those are something that really stood out to me and helped me to kind of reshape my design statement, which is where we get to a conceptual diagram. So for this design, I really wanted to aim to create a meaningful, inclusive public space that really honors Eupora's history, strengthening that community bond, as well as identity and kind of restoring ecological function across the site through design. So some objectives that I kind of set for my project was to honor local history and legacy, strengthen community connection, and then really work to promote inclusive and accessible design, foster engagement and learning throughout the site, as well as celebrating place-based identity. So you might be thinking, how do you accomplish that? So to honor local history and legacy, that's kind of done through embedding this narrative within the design. Strengthening community connection is done through these large gathering spaces that really promote connection and intergenerational activity throughout the site. This inclusive public space, that's something that's done through accessibility. It's something that's done through identity and really working to present representation through design. For engagement and learning, that's done through a series of different moves, whether that be these active sports areas or a learning area within this indoor facility that can work to foster education through classrooms or things of that nature that can be used for arts and crafts, that can be used for ecological information, teaching students and children in this area about the wildlife and nature that are existing on this site. So moving forward, I looked at 4 really relevant and strong case studies for my design. The first being the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, the second being the Memorial to Victims of Violence in Mexico, the third, the National Sculptural Museum, and then the fourth, the Leaf Park and Neighborhood Center. So first is the National Museum for Memorial and Justice. This is located in Montgomery, Alabama, and it really stood out to me as kind of a real-world application of memory and how, spatially someone can be represented through design while proceeding through a series of approach and kind of how you work to tell a story through that. Next is the Memorial to Victims of Violence in Mexico. I think this site does a really good job of telling a story while also applying transparency. So how do you create these large kind of structures that really work to tell a story while also allowing for visual transparency across the site, ensuring safety and things of that nature. Then we have the National Sculptural Museum, which is a really beautiful space. And you might be thinking, how does a sculptural museum apply to this? The National Sculptural Museum does a really beautiful job of creating a central alley. So as you proceed through that site, you're experiencing all these sculptures beside you, but it's terminating at this one central sculpture, which is seen here. And then my final one was a Leaf Park and Neighborhood Center, which does a really beautiful job of integrating structured play into the topography. So how do we kind of look at that in the context of our site and understand how that could be done locally. So then moving forward, we have my functional diagram, which took a step back to really analyze and understand the requirements needed for sizing. So for the basketball courts, that's going to be roughly 100 by 60 feet to really accommodate for 2 regulation size courts. Tennis courts, these can also interchangeably be used as pickleball depending on how they're painted, but those would be roughly around 80 by 70. The pavilion, which would include restrooms, would be approximately 60 by 100. And then for structured play, that can range from 60 by 100 and then a natural play area of around 60 by 60. Parking to accommodate for 20 cars with 2 ADA spots and a 2-lane roadway, that'd be approximately 60 by 100 feet. But I think there's room for that to increase with the necessity of additional parking to really ensure that there's enough parking on site. And then the roadway being the 24 to 30 feet. So looking back at those case studies, how does that apply to kind of this memorial and reflective space? Understanding that as you're navigating through this story, you're experiencing more than just a space, you're experiencing a narrative. You're experiencing a lived experience of this story while also understanding that it's a broader context, not just of the Brantleys, but of the broader kind of civil rights struggle, not just in the South, but across the globe. So that was a real focus for me, looking at having these panels kind of transition from here, so that as you're crossing the site, it still allows for that transparency and kind of eyes on the street, if you will. Moving forward to the Sculptural Museum, again, addressing that alley that terminates at this central sculpture. How can that be applied to the Brantleys? How can, we have this sculpture of Toby Brantley at the termination of this alley, surrounded by sculptures along the way that work to tell the story of the civil rights struggle throughout Mississippi. And then ending at that point with Toby Brantley and kind of what his role was in that story. Moving forward to that integrated play, so understanding the topographical nature of this part of the site and how that could be integrated. Locating the pavilion kind of centrally within that recreation zone so that, parents can chill out in this pavilion while their kids are playing basketball, but then their younger child's playing at the playground. So really centrally locating that so it's accessible for everyone. And then moving forward to intent and impact. So what does this mean? For me, the design is really centered on the life and memory of Toby Brantley. It's about centering around design, around community, and understanding that what we're doing here is meant to tell a story, tell a broader story, and really focus on centering the community at everything that we do. So it's more than just a static memorial. It becomes an active space for memory and really continuing that legacy beyond just one life. It's about preserving that and then pushing it beyond just what happened. It's what can we do. So that's everything for me. Thank you all so much for listening. And